Okay, good evening, everybody. I hope my voice is audible to everyone. Uh, I hope my voice is audible to everyone, and I think that's it for now. I will start today's doubt clearing session, the problem solving session, housing policy and planning, an NPTEL course by Professor Uttam Kumar, IIT. Myself, I'm Aditya Bandari, and PMRF at Indian Institute of Technology. So this is the problem solving session for week 6 happening today on 5th September 2022. So before we go to old questions for the week number 6, actually based on one of the questions which have been asked by one of the learners last week, if there is some kind of example for core city housing strategy which has been discussed by professor in the week number 5. So there are 6 different steps. First of all, we have to understand the importance of the core city, why the core city is actually important uh, for studying. Then we should identify, is it a pilgrimage town? Is it because of some other case? Is it an industrial town? Why the core city is like that? So you have to understand the nature of the core city. So understand the importance of core city. Then understanding what are the different issues present there. Is it clumsiness, congestion due to the very close proximity of the building location and high density, inadequate infrastructure, etc. Then we assess the infrastructure space and holding capacity. How much uh, infrastructure does that how much infrastructure does that core area load take the load of, and how much infrastructure is existing. Then using the concept of re-densification and de-densification either to increase the density or decrease the density. The concepts of re-densification and de-densification can be used, and prescribing the appropriate development controls in terms of changing dynamic FSI, floor space index, or floor area ratio, or it can also be the transferable development rights, which we have discussed very much in detail in the last week's problem solving session. And finally, incentivize and enforce. So in this regard, based on the question asked by one of the learners last week, so I tried to identify one of the case studies associated with the core area housing. This was one of the report. It is initial report of how to carry out in one of the case studies which has been taken up in India. So it is in the Bengaluru city, Peta. It is an core area housing. It's considered as largest informal economy. So informal economy refers to the how economic activities that are not legally established and that do have some kind of taxing regulations by the government of India. So informal economies do not have these kind of regulations. They're usually the vendors, household level vendors, the hawkers which we see in the roads and etc. So this consists of the informal economy. So this neighborhood is basically an informal economy, and it is a market center with a well-defined market body, and which are also there are different types of mercantile activities that have been happening in this particular location of the city. So if you look at another thing, it has deep networks of crowded. See, the streets are crowded. It has multicultural identity. There is a vast social history and economic geography, and it actually is considered as one of the important landmarks in the planning and design for any urban agglomeration. So there is an innate nature that has been observed for this particular neighborhood. So it has specific criteria. So this was one of the core area housing project which has been studied in India. So first of all, to understand, they understood the importance of core city, and how it is important. Then understanding the different issues which are there in this core area housing. So there are 4 different issues which the urban local body has identified in this one. So the first one is the land value uh, has decreased because of the encroachment and other things that are happening on the road. So there are very narrow roads, but there is economic activity uh, increased informal economy, so local informal economy that's happening. So there are people coming up and establish their stalls on the roads and etc. So this is causing narrow roads. So this is one of the major issues. The land value has used to be more, but it has been decreasing. Actually, please remember this report was prepared in around 2004 period, so it is very old document. But there are very limited number of studies that have taken place in India, so I have chosen this one. So the second one is there is no pedestrian safety. So because of traffic, high traffic flow on the narrow streets and encroachments, and the pedestrians don't feel safe to travel on these roads, then it has become fragmented into many pieces of land. So there is no much of land that's available for any further development. So it is densely populated and very dense activities are happening. And the earlier traditional activities are now replaced by the uh, contemporary building types, contemporary set of mercantile activities, which include warehouses, etc. So there are different occupations that have been taken. So these are few issues identified in this one. So, so if you look at it, the first one is to understand our core city importance. Then we understood the issues. Then the assessment of existing infrastructure stress and holding capacity. So they prepared the land use split for that particular time. It was a residential, which consists of 84 hectares of the total 224 hectares. It is consisting of 37.5% of the area. And commercial is following just residential very closely with 31.4%, followed by industrial, semi-public, public and semi-public other land uses. So these different set of land uses, the percentage by split, it is predominantly residential and commercial. So there is high activity of commercial. Out of commercial also they have shown two different types of. So the first one is trades and businesses, which consists of 31.4%, and corporate offices and services that consists of 33.2%. So again, assessment of infrastructure stress and holding capacity again. So what are the problems associated with the infrastructure? So first comes the water and sanitation has been discussed. So sanitation levels are low in most pockets of the neighborhood. Then followed by roadways, there is high traffic and congestion and it's not equipped to handle that current amount of the traffic because as we discussed earlier, there has also been the uh, encroachments on the road due to the local informal activities. And the third one is urban amenities, which include the basic social infrastructure services such as schools and post offices, police stations, hospitals, and primary health care centers. So there has been inadequacy based on the guidelines. So they have tabulated the different types of urban amenities, and they have shown they have used the ratio of number of existing urban amenities for the total planning district population in the standard. So based on that one, uh, they have calculated the holding capacity, infrastructure stress in the city, in the neighborhood. So the fourth one is the concept of redensification and dedensification. For this one, they wanted to achieve it using two steps: the revitalization with improving the roads. First one is to improve the roads, then the parking conditions and regular traffic. So to do that, there is a need for increasing the width of the roads and etc. And similarly, to improve all existing infrastructure facilities. So for the water supply, even for the uh, social infrastructure services, everything requires huge amounts of land. So this process of revitalization requires different concepts of redensification and dedensification, which I discussed earlier. So for this one, there if you look at the project report, the detailed project report, it also discusses about what are the different sectors of infrastructure that need to be focused upon. So first one is to increase the area under public domain. So increase the area used for roads, parking, physical and social infrastructure. For that one, they have made an approximation of the detailed cost assumptions for the each and every sector. The first one was for the roads. How many amount of roads need to be laid in terms of meter square? Then to improve the existing roads and parking condition, how much investment should be done? How to improve the water supply services? How to connect the different households to the sewage and manage the wastewater generated accordingly? And the solid waste management and many other miscellaneous and landscape costs such as which also include the recreational facilities, local parks and etc. So so these are the different strategies. So whenever they want to improve the redensify, they need to understand this is generally in order to improve the infrastructure services which are very basic for the survival of humans in these neighborhoods. So then, fifth one is to prescribe the appropriate development control. So for this core area housing project, so there have been three different acts. The Karnataka Municipal Corporation Act of 1976, so that is applicable to the Bangalore Municipal Authority, Bangalore, Bruhat Bangalore Nagarpalika, so it is Municipal Corporation, Mahanagaraparika. Then the Karnataka Urban Development Authorities Act. There are two different acts, Urban Development Authorities Act, which makes the establishment of urban development authorities for urban and regional plans and the master plans to be developed for the cities. Then the third one is the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Act of 1961. So uh, so to appropriate the development controls for the development of this local area, the core area, they can use the uh, clauses and the provisions of these three acts in order to implement and redevelop the core area housing. So, in order to, based on the available reports and everything, I'm currently unaware of the existing situation of this one. So, we could not actually, because basically this is not a core area housing project, but it's core area revitalization project. So, incentivizing and enforcing mechanism could not be procured from the existing reports. But I'll try to search, and if it is available, I'll also share with you. But any further reading with respect to the core city housing, there has been one of the documents published in the Asian Development Bank South Asia Working Paper Series. So it is titled Enabling Smart Urban Redevelopment in India through Floor Area Ratio Incentives. So if you look at the contents of this one, it actually discusses different policy and regulatory environment that is present in India for the urbanization. So as we discussed, based on the initial first week course, how the urban housing policy has been developed in India. So before 1980s, it used to be more of a provider, then it became uh, an enabler, then it became a facilitator kind of thing. So we discussed the different in the this particular report discusses the different policy environment that has been available in India. The first one is Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act of 1976, where the amount of land can be held by a single person in the city has been regulated accordingly and has repealed lifelong and similar mandates have been made by respective state governments and the coastal regulation zone notification. So different regulation, development control regulations in the coastal areas and the a- rivers that are flowing towards the river towards the sea of 1986. Then rent control acts, the RERA and everything. Then current zoning practices in the metropolitan cities. Then it also discusses the socio-economic impacts of uh, restriction density. If you are decreasing the density or increasing the density, what can be the different impacts? Then it also discusses certain amount about the JNN Nehru Mission, the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission of 2004. Then it also discusses about the Smart City Mission of 2014. And there have been also been a couple of case studies of one of Mumbai and Ahmedabad. So this can be one of the interesting topic where it discusses about how FAR incentives can be used for urban redevelopment. So you can browse this through the link which has been given there, and I'll also share the document with you on the Google Drive folder afterwards. So let us quickly go through there haven't been much amount of questions with respect to this one. So let us go through each and every question properly, and we will also look at each and every option. So consider the following sentence: Group housing offers more density than plotted housing. This is statement number one. And second one is segregated zoning enhances community development in new housing areas. So now what we have to do is there have been four options. There are four options for us now. The first one says both are true. Second one is A is true, B is false. And the third one says vice versa. That is A is false and B is true. And fourth one is both are false. So let us examine both the options first. The first one is group housing offers more density than in the plotted housing. So actually, if we remember all the sessions, all the classes, all the five different sessions which have happened in the week number 6. So we identified group housing is basically the type of housing in which there is a common landowner, that is it can be public or cooperative, but each and every individual living in this group housing project owns the particular apartment or the building dwelling unit. So group housing generally supports uh, to adopt the increasing FSR to exploit the FSI to a higher level as much as possible, because it is usually providing the scope for developing high-rise buildings and also the high-rise buildings in a closer proximity. And but also there is also an advantage of having common utilities, common recreational spaces, common facilities, including the small commercial establishments. So group housing usually offers wide range of scope for achieving different levels of housing with respect to the building height and also the building spread also. But when it comes to the plotted housing, if you compare it with the plotted housing, it usually does not provide that much scope to develop and exploit the FAR accordingly. So the first statement, if you understand, it is true. So group housing actually offers more density achievement provisions compared to the plotted housing. So if you look at the second statement, segregated zoning enhances community development in a housing area. So segregated zoning, if you look at it in two different point of view, the first one is based on the income groups, or second one is in terms of the activity, mixed use activity, land use activity. If we increase this zoning, so there, if increase zoning actually creates a barrier so that people cannot communicate between the two different sections of the society. So segregated zoning in this in this way actually decreases the chances of the social interaction among the community, the people who are living within the society. So the second statement, if you look at it, uh, segregated zoning actually decreases the community development, because by reducing the amount of spaces available for the social interaction, and also uh, the tendency that actually develops among the citizens living in the different zones, that they don't feel belonging to the different zone again. So that is how it actually decreases the community development in the new housing areas. So if you look at it, the option number A, group housing effects offers more density than the plotted housing, is a true statement. When it comes to the second one, B, it is false. That is segregated zoning actually decreases the community development in the new housing areas. So if you look at it, for the first one, the both are true is the false statement. A is true and B is false is the correct option. Similarly, A is false and B is true is also wrong, and both are false. So this is basically a numerical problem again. What we have been given. We have to carefully look at these kind of questions. The first question, we have to take the given values and accordingly calculate the uh, what is required for this. So the second question states what will be the FAR, the floor area ratio, also known as FSI in certain cases, floor space index. The floor area ratio on the plot if total area of the plot is 8 hectares and the built up area to be achieved is 1,20,000 square meters. So you can look at this objectively. Then let us also look at the four different options: 1.25, 1.5. So let us first summarize whatever the data that has been actually given to us. So the total plot area is given as 8 hectares. Then the required built-up area is 1,20,000 square meters. So if we look at both of them, now we can do it in both ways also. If we can also convert the required built-up area into the hectares, or also we can also convert the total plot area into the square meters. First of all, what we have to do is to bring both the area units of the area onto the on a common scale. So first of all, we based on our assumption, we calculate the total plot area in square meters. So to calculate the amount to convert the area from hectares to square meters, it should be multiplied by 100 into 100. That is 10,000 times. So 8 hectares of area actually becomes 8,000 meters square. So 8,000 meters square. Out of this one, the amount of floor area, the built-up area which we can develop out of this is 1.2 lakhs meters square. So for this one, if you look at the calculation of floor area ratio, it is basically calculated the total built-up area that has to be developed upon the total plot area. So if you look accordingly, to calculate the FAR for this particular problem, so first of all, we have to divide the 1,20,000 meter square of the total built-up area that we are trying to develop from this new housing project, divided by the 80,000 meter square. That is the total plot area. So cancelling out zeros, we will get 12 by 8, that is 3 by 2. So FAR that requires to be achieved is 1.5. So I tried to prepare a small schematic so that we can understand it in a different way. So as if this is a plot having that is 80,000 meters square of area. So in that case, if we can develop the total to develop the total floor area of 1,20,000 based on the available regulations, based on the Town and Country Planning Act or the Development Control Regulation for that particular city. So if we can achieve the a floor area ratio of 1.5 up to a limit of height again similarly. So in this case, if we consider if we can build 50% ground coverage, that is 40,000 square, meter square out of total 80,000 if we are trying to use, and rest of the area will be used for certain common purposes, including the small establishments of the like dairy booths, etc., and even the small parks and accessible spaces, including the roads and pedestrian pathways. So in three floors, it will account to the uh, total built up area of 1.2 meters square. So that is usually how it is calculated. So if you look at the options, there are four different options. It is not one way as we discussed. We calculate it as 1.5. So and it is two if it is so it varies again. It based on the plot area and the amount of built-up area which we can achieve. Actually, based on these two, FAR can be calculated in this way. So floor area ratio it is usually calculated as total built-up area divided by the total plot area. So let's go to the question number 3 now. Identify the group formed before development of housing of their own initiative. So it has been constantly being discussed again. So there are four given options, and out of the which only one can be can be the correct answer. So the first one is housing association. We usually see the housing associations and etc. But it is usually does not form before the development of housing. Housing associations usually form after the development of housing. So this is not uh, the correct option for this question. So similarly, housing cooperatives. Yes, the housing cooperatives is developed. It's a group of people having common interest to develop the common housing. They together form a cooperative. Then then form a cooperative, they regularize their cooperative society, then they buy the land, then they develop the infrastructure, then they develop the housing and sell it to the residents. So this is how it usually happens. So the first that the group that is formed before the development of housing is housing cooperative. However, there are other two options. Let us also look at them. The resident welfare association, it is also usually formed after the development of housing in the any new housing areas. So it is basically meant. It usually consists of some of the residents of the same housing society, and they together frame a welfare association where they're dealing with the common issues that can also be faced, and they also have interaction among themselves. That is how actually a community gets developed in the finally housing communities. The communities again it is also developed after the establishment of housing. So the correct answer for this question is housing cooperatives. So this is the last question for today's session again. So institutional housing can be encouraged by. So there are four different options. Institutional housing, as discussed by Professor, which actually usually means is like it is basically nothing but employees housing. The employers need to provide the employees with housing so that it actually indirectly increases the productivity of the employees because they don't have to travel too far from their workplace to their workplace from the different housing which they usually find outside the campus area. So it is usually employers accountability to provide the employees with the housing, that is the institutional housing, where the residents of uh, residents of these institutional housing are usually the benefactors, the people who benefit the employer in direct fashion as they work and their productivity increases because they don't get they actually get enough time apart from the traveling and etc other problems. So it is how the institutional housing occurs. So institutional housing can be encouraged by the four options. The first one is facilitating employers to ensure home for their employees. So the first option is straightforwardly directly depicting that employers, if the employers are facilitated, so it is basically discusses that if we can enable the employer, if we help the employer to develop a home for the employees, that is actually helping in development of the institutional housing. So that is a straightforward option. Then allocation of land to all employees, it actually indirectly refers to, it is similar to something like cooperative housing, or it can also be it is also where the land is allocated and it is developed. It can be plotted development also. So allocation of land to all employees is not actually increasing the institutional housing. It otherwise might develop some kind of plotted housing or group housing kind of thing. So it is not institutional housing. And, and I'm not sure whether if such practices exist anywhere in India or abroad. So, but if I find any, I'll try to share with you accordingly. But allocation of land to all employees is usually not practiced anywhere accordingly. So this is not a direct. Even if it is practiced, it is not actually directly encouraging institutional housing. So then the legal reforms to place force all employees to buy a house, this is somewhat forceful and it does not go according to the constitutional freedom which have been provided to the citizens of India. Any employer cannot force any even the state governments or general governments by law and act cannot force all the employees to buy their own house. And the fourth one is institutionalized rent to own scheme. So institutionalizing rent to own schemes actually can help in development of a higher number of rental housings and uh, serviced apartments. This does not directly contribute in the increasing of the institutional housing facility. So the correct answer for this one is the first option. It's the facilitating employers to ensure home for their employees. If we can help, if the uh, regulatory environment can be made friendly for employees in order to procure their land and develop houses for their employees, that will actually develop the institutional housing. So increase institutional housing indirectly also reduces the burden on existing plotted housing, group housing, and other forms of housing, other form of formal housing typologies. So other allocation of land to all employees and legal reforms to force all employees to buy the house and institutionalizing the rent to own schemes. So all of them are not actually encouraging the institutional housing structure in India. So, as you all know, today is Teachers Day again. So we have uh, we have been celebrating it in different parts again. Even professors are also busy according to that. So anyway, happy Teachers Day to everybody. And in that case, if you have any doubts, let us discuss them in detail. You can again, as usual, you can either unmute yourself and ask me the question, or you can also send your questions to the in call messages chat box. Okay, that is the case. I'll just rush through all the slides once again, hopefully, and I'll be here until if somebody also joins the meeting and if somebody has any kind of doubt also. So the week six, initially we discussed the core city housing strategy. We are just trying to revise everything. So there are six different strategies that are steps that are involved in this housing strategy of core city development. The understanding the importance of core city and understanding the different issues that are present in there to assess the stress on the infrastructure and the holding capacity of the particular area, then concept of re-densification and de-densification, either to increase or decrease the densities to properly provide the infrastructure for the residents, then the prescribing appropriate development controls, how to develop and how to regulate the development, then incentivize and for this one is took a case study of Bangalore, in which the PETA, that largest informal economy, this report has been prepared in the year of 2024. And initially they studied the importance of the core city, how why it is important because of it being the largest informal economy, and it has been transitioning from the conventional set of mercantile activities to the modern IT related environment. So there have been four different issues for this core area revitalization. The first one is the decrease in the land value because of increased encroachment. Then safety of pedestrians was enriched because of the high traffic flow and encroachment again on the narrow roads. Then the area has been has been deprived of large chunks of land, so no further development can be possible. New developments can be possible. There is no traditional activities, as we discussed earlier. They have been replaced by the modern and more conventional, more contemporary type of activity, mercantile activities. So for the core area housing, to assess the infrastructure stress and holding capacity, initially they discussed the land use mix. Predominantly it is residential and commercial, so it is almost similar to 37%, 37.5% of residential activity and almost 32% of the commercial activity. There have been issues with respect to the water and sanitation. Inadequate water supply and sanitation level is usually low in different pockets of the neighborhood. Then the roadways, there is high traffic and congestion. Then the urban amenities, there is inadequacy of the education facilities, health facilities, post office and policies with respect to the guidelines, and the number of them available is similar to the planning district of the PETA of Bangalore. Then rejuvenation of the city core. This is how the concept of redensification and dedensification can be carried out. The major rejuvenation of city core is focusing on improving the roads and parking conditions and the regular traffic in the core area, then improving the different infrastructure facilities. So this is how the process of revitalization has been taken place. So for this one, they have estimated the cost that is required for different things. The first one is to increase the area under the public domain, to increase the area which is required for roads, footpaths, pedestrian pathways, uh, parking facilities, physical infrastructure, again water supply, sanitation, sewerage management, solid waste management, stormwater management, social infrastructure, again hospitals, schools, recreational facilities, post offices, telephones, etc. So all this come as social infrastructure. So different. These are the main focus. This this is the reason why the land is required for developing infrastructure. For this one, the de-densification is a key strategy, and to, appropriate development controls have been provided according to with respect to. So they have not modified any development control, but they have followed the clauses and followed the provisions which are enabled by the three different acts in the Karnataka. First one is the Municipal Corporation Act of 1976, then it's Urban Development Authority Act of 1987, TCP Act of 1961. So it is suggested to go through this reading. So it is a report. It discusses about FAR initiatives, how FAR can be used in smart urban redevelopment in India. It was published in 2018. So it discusses from wide range of policy and regulatory environment available in India, starting from Urban Land Ceiling Act of 1976, then CRZ of 1996, then Rent Control Act, different practices in metropolitan cities, how the density restriction in the cities impact the socio-economic nature of the society. Then JNNR mission, then the smart cities mission. And then we discuss the different questions. The first one is to so that we discussed that the group housing actually offers more density than the plotted housing because of uh, provision of large number of scope to within the same amount of area. Consider an example of 400 square meter of 4,000 square meter of area available for plotted housing and group housing. In group housing, there are much higher number of residents, higher number of dwelling units that can be accommodated because the plot is owned by the plot is not owned by each and every individual. It is owned by the community. It is owned by the cooperative society. So whenever we discuss the group housing, whenever the group housing is developed, actually provides the scope for the more population density compared to the plotted housing, where usually there is a very limited chance to actually exploit the FS at the greater level. Similarly, segregated zoning actually decreases the community development in new housing areas, because when the zoning is done in such a way that it does not promote the social interaction, so it decreases the community development. So statement A is true, statement B is false. So that means the option 2 is correct. So second question we discussed. Second question, we discussed the FAR of on the plot of total area of plot is 8 hectares. So now we have to calculate the total built-up area, uh, total FAR that needs to be that needs to be provided in order to achieve minimum of 1.2 lakh meter square of area. There are four options again. To calculate this, whatever we have been given from the question are required. The first one is the total plot area of 8 hectares. So the required built up area of 1.2 lakh meter square. So to either we have to convert the total plot area into the same units as the built up area, or we have to convert the built up area into the same units as plot area. So you can either convert the required built up area from meter square to hectares, or total plot area from hectares to meter square. For this question, we try to convert the first one, the earlier one, that is the total plot area, we calculated in meter squares. To calculate the area in hectares to convert the area in hectares to uh, area in meter square, we have to multiply it by 1000. So this similarly multiplied by 100 meters into 100 meters like a square. So it gives us 80,000 meters square. So to calculate the floor area ratio, the equation is that we divide the total built up area with the total plot area. So similarly, the total plot area in this study in the question is that 80,000 uh, meters square, that is 8 hectares. Similarly, 1.2 lakh area is the amount of built up area that needs to be constructed. So if you cancel out the zeros and calculate it, is 3 by 2. The FAR of 3 divided 2, that means it is 1.5. So just an example, if we have a plot of 80,000 meters square, and if we want to achieve 1.5 FAR, so we can and consider if the city has given a ground coverage of 50%. So the remaining 50% we can use for different purposes, including uh, recreational parks or small commercial establishment, which include the dairy booths, telephone booths, etc., and small printing shops, etc., and then road network and etc. So all of them will be provided in the rest of the 40 meter square. So if we can develop this 40,000 meter square area in three floors, then the 1.2 lakh meter square of built up area can be achieved. So again, FAR is giving us a regulation of how much built up area can be developed over the existing FAR. Again, the local guidelines, the development control regulations also provide the ground coverage that can be achieved. Also, the building maximum building height that can be achieved. So, based on those two regulations, also the builders or the group housing society or can actually develop the plot accordingly using many innovative methods. Again, uh, so the correct answer for this question is 1.5. The FAR needs to be 1.5 if you have plot of 8 hectare and you have to develop at least 1.2 lakhs, 1.2 lakh meter square of built up area. The third one is what group is formed before the development of housing. So to to form a group housing, the first step is to form a housing cooperative. So similarly, there are the three other options which have been given: the housing association, resident welfare associations, housing committees. These three are usually formed after the development of housing in the new housing areas. So housing cooperative, after establishment of housing cooperatives, uh, they need to be registered again with the Companies Act or the Societies Act. Uh, then the Societies Act is usually registered under the Cooperative Societies Act. Then the land is procured. Then the land is developed. Then the building construction happens. Then the people come and stay there. Further, last in the last of the community develops. Then other community associations, the housing associations, residential welfare associations, housing communities form as a later step of the same. Then institutional housing can be encouraged by institutional housing actually can be encouraged by facilitating the employees to ensure home for their employees. If the regulatory environment or policy environment is friendly for the employer, considering IT park areas and other areas. So if you look at these areas, So if the employers can ensure their employees have housing in the vicinity of the campus, their respective campuses, then that will actually save the time for the employees also. It will actually increase the productivity, and also it will also reduce the burden on the existing housing stock within the city, existing rental housing stock, existing the group housing stock, and even the plotted housing. So it will reduce the burden on the same thing, and the employees productivity also increases accordingly. So, but other options, allocating the land to all employees, it does not actually improve the situation of institutional housing. Then the legal reforms to force all employees to buy a house. It actually encourages the plotted housing and the group housing type, but it does not directly support the institutional housing. And the third one is institutionalizing rent to own scheme. Actually, it increases the amount of the rental housing. So, in order to depict this previous one, so institutional housing can be encouraged. How it can be encouraged. So I have certain examples of which we can see. I'll just provide a small. I'll provide a small example where. So this is basically a map of Hyderabad city in 2004. So when high tech city was developed, so this particular building which you are looking at is which is basically the cyber towers which was built initially, and there was no further development around. There is some kind of plotted housing here. So to to and these images are taken in the next 4 years gap again. This is taken in 2008. Still, there is not much of commercial establishment that came again, not in the institutional establishment. But when it has been developed and over a period of time, currently, if you look at it in 2022, it is like this. In 2018, one of the major thing is so they reduce the distance between these two places by building a bridge. So this actually has reduced the travel time from one part of the city to another part. So again, IT Park is really easily accessible because of this bridge again. So the housing, if you can look at it within the span of 20 years, how much housing has been developed. It includes all different types of housing again. The institutional housing has been there. Certain IT parks, IT parks have their own institutional housing, and also they give it to their employees on different rental and the premium based basis. And there are also the rental housing facilities which have been developed in different parts of in the surroundings of the high tech city area. And also there has been commercial establishments which have been developed. Uh, so basically, it is how the city also develops accordingly. So uh, if everything is okay, I think we can wind up today's session in that case. So,
Yeah, sir, thank you for the section.
sure, sure, sure. Thank you very much. So, I'm concluding this meeting in that case. So, we can conclude this, I guess. Okay, thank you.